normally we're stuck to the surface of the continuum of logic. We're stuck fast, kind of like limpets or other things that can be stuck fast to a surface. It's a little bit like we're flies walking around on fly paper in a way. That flies can't actually walk on fly paper because they get stuck. But if you can imagine that the continuum of thought, or the logical continuum, is kind of like fly paper, in as much as we can walk around a bit, but we can traverse it, but we can never actually lift our feet up. We can never jump. The one thing we can never do is jump. Not when we're obeying the rules of logic, because the rules of logic don't allow jumping. Jumping in this context means being illogical, being metaphorical, not being literal, but saying something, but not because you're saying it literally. So really the situation of being stuck to a flat surface is the situation where we're completely literal the whole time. And when we talk to someone who's completely literal, it's kind of maddening, because communication just goes. Actually, there is no such thing as communication when everything is literal. It might seem like communication. I can say, pass me the biscuit tin, and you can pass me the biscuit tin, because I literally do mean pass me the biscuit tin. I'm not trying to be philosophical or poetical. And we could say, okay, that's communication, but it's a very, very limited type of communication. It leaves a lot to be desired. That type of communication is lacking in everything of a more refined or poetical nature. It's so crude as to not actually partake in reality at all. It only partakes in the laws of a formal system. It has nothing to it. And yet it's all that we can see when we're stuck fast to the logical surface of the thinking mind. So all of this relates to what I was saying last time about the reverse viewpoint. So in the reverse viewpoint, it's kind of as if we have to be acrobats. So when we're understanding things or looking at things, talking about things, we're actually having to learn to be acrobatic about it and leap right up in the air and take a completely radically opposed viewpoint. And if we can't do that, everything we see is literal, which means that everything we see doesn't mean a damn thing, which is possibly a hard idea to understand. But the point is that when everything is literal and everything is linear or logical, everything is only an extension of everything else. Whatever statement I make is merely a rephrasing or extrapolation of another statement. But it is really, in other words, the same statement. It's tautological. So this world, if you can imagine that, it's kind of the logical linear world, the world of thought. It's kind of a thing that you put together. It's like kind of like a Lego world. You put it together and you expand it, and it seems to create this world. But actually, it's all collapsible, because it all collapses down to one particular statement, and everything else is a tautological restatement of the original statement. So when we collapse it to see what it really is saying, it's not saying anything. It's never saying anything new. Never, 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 never saying anything new. So that's not a good situation, because that is inimical. I always get stuck on that word. I should say something different. It is hostile to us as conscious beings. It demands we follow its rules, and in the following of its rules, there's nothing left of us. There's nothing left of who we really are. We're not constructs of logic, even though as far as thought is concerned, everything's a construct of body. So the reversed viewpoint is not too hard to understand, really. We can think about it. Well, one way to think about it is in terms of the Pleroma, which is explained by David Bohm in one of his talks. And I can't remember it exactly, but he was kind of saying that suppose you go outside, middle of the night, and it's a cloudless sky, and there's all these twinkling stars set against the black velvet of the night sky. So our normal way of seeing things is to say that the black velvet of the night sky isn't anything. That's the void, that's the backdrop, that's there's nothing in between the stars, and the stars are the actual positive reality. So there's all these stars and nothing in between them, which is not a hard thing for us to grasp, because that's how we ordinarily see things. So then if we do the mental somersault, see things in the reversed viewpoint, from the reversed viewpoint, then we'd say, well, actually, we're seeing it all backwards, because really everything is existence except for these stars, which are little points of nothingness. So that's the reverse, that's the photographic inverse, that there's pinpricks of nothingness in a overall body of being. And somehow we look at these pinpricks of emptiness as being the thing itself, and we don't see the being for what it is. So not necessarily the easiest kind of idea to get across, and David Bohm certainly does a better job than I just did. But another way to put it is to think about people talking and say, okay, when we listen to people, if I'm listening to someone shooting their mouth off and they're talking to me, and it's going on and droning on and saying things, much as I am now, then normally we would say the words contain the information, and the space between the words is just when we're waiting for the next word. There's no good in it. There's no richness in it. There's no information in it. So we're straining, listening for the next word. So we listen to one word and then, what's he going to say next? What's he going to say next? We listen to the next word. Hopefully, when we listen to enough words, it'll make really good sense. So that's the positive way of looking at things. That's the non-Pleroma. Now, I would argue that when we get more subtle in our appreciation of things, we start to realize that the words themselves are nothing. They're padding or stuffing. They're not worth listening to. There's no information in them. But the space between the words is really where it's at. The space between the words is rich in meaning, rich in information, endlessly rich. It's a gold mine, every single space. So when you're listening to someone talk, you could apply this mental acrobatics principle and pay attention to the space between their words. It saves you having to be bored out of your mind listening to their actual words and the actual cumbersome content of what they're saying, because that's just crap, as we know. Almost always, well, definitely always, if it's literal communication is crap. It's not very interesting. It doesn't pertain to reality. It's just a thought doing its thing. But then if you listen to someone and you listen to the space between their words, like you aren't straining to get something out of each word and think, what am I missing? What's he going to say next? Because that doesn't matter. You just listen to the space. And every time there's a space between two words, it's like, wow, that's great. So you're listening to the space. You're not listening to the positive figure. And that does help a lot. If you're getting fed up listening to someone, try listening to the space between their words, because there's a lot in that. So the other thing we could say is that instead of listening to someone else who's mouthing off about something, yapping away, we're also prone to yapping. saying positive, definite things because we think positive, definite things are where it's at, because we don't realize that it isn't. That's just absence of information, and it's already at where it is at is when we don't try and say positive, definite things, because there's nothing definite or positive about being or reality. Only our mental constructs, only our abstract formulations of thought. So then we could notice ourselves thinking, and it's the same thing. Here I am thinking, there's a thought, there's another thought. Oh, here, guess what? Here comes another thought coming down the road. Oh, yeah, it's a thought. Loads of thoughts, one thought after another. And boy, are they tedious. Recycled garbage thoughts, recycled forever and ever, for no purpose, other than, like a person who loves talking because they love the sound of their own voice, not because they've got something super profound to impart. That's not it at all. They're yapping because they love yapping. They like to fill the space. Space is kind of threatening, so they fill it up with our bullshit, and then no one's threatened, everything's cozy, and that's human culture for you. Fill up all the space. So when we think, it's like someone who likes talking for the sake of talking, which means that we think in order to fill up the space, because thought wants to fill up the space because the space is uncertain, radically uncertain, and that is profoundly challenging for us. And we could say, well, why is space or uncertainty? Because space is uncertainty. Space is never certain, otherwise it wouldn't be space, it'd be a figure. Why is space so challenging? Why is radical uncertainty so challenging? And the reason for that is that if I'm listening to something which belongs in the world of form, words, thoughts, definite statements about the world, then that reaffirms my existence as a creature from the world of form, as being a definite entity, a definite me, a positive me. I really am here most definitely, and I really am saying these things, etc., etc. So the positive or concrete self gets reaffirmed by the positive or concrete world, of course. And it doesn't matter if that positive or concrete world is bullshit or totally banal or boring as hell, because it is tedious as hell. We'll put up with that. Like watching very bad TV, we'll put up with it because at least it's TV, something to do. And instead, well, we put up with it. We put up with it because the benefit outweighs the tediousness of listening to it. And the benefit is it reaffirms the positive self. So we'll put up with the positive world, even though it's dull, boring, lacking anything new, lacking anything interesting. It's the same old thing over and over again. But we'll put up with that, even though it's a terrible drag, as Alan Watts would say, harking back to the 60s. Because it reaffirms the positive self, and that's the name of the game. That's what really matters. So, which, in psychological terms, you could say is security or safety. Safety for who? Safety for the positive self, because if the positive self witnesses uncertainty or space, it doesn't get validated, and it frays at the edges, and very, very quickly, it doesn't just fray at the edges, it frays all the way and comes to pieces in a mass of threads and dissolves. It's like saying when you stare into the void stares, you find the void is staring back at you. And maybe it isn't like that, but maybe it is a bit like that, in the sense that when you stare into space, you realize that you are space too. And if you're okay about that, no problem. In fact, it's quite cool. It's a lot more, it's liberating. But if we have issues with that because we're attached to the positive self without realizing we're attached to it, because we haven't really looked at the fact that we're attached to it, then it's super threatening, because the very worst thing in the world is to be attached to the positive self and then start to realize that there isn't a positive self and there isn't a positive world. It's just space on the inside and space on the outside. That's the very, very, very worst thing in the world from the point of view of the positive or concrete self. That's the state of non-concreteness, non-literality. It's a non-logical, it's illogical, alogical, one or the other. Hell of a lot of freedom in it. In fact, all the freedom there ever was or ever could be is in space, and space is all there is. If you want to have things in space, we have to put them there ourselves. If you want to make little figures or draw stuff or write stuff, say stuff, we have to do that ourselves. And we do that ourselves. And we do it in order to repress all awareness of space. We scribble all over it, like being given a nice, lovely sheet of paper, white paper, and we scribble all over it, like graffiti in a toilet, all that kind of stuff. Not because what we're writing is profound or poetical or great or interesting or funny, just because we just want to cover up the space, really. So, in order to make this somersault of perception, we've got to be willing to make the transition from being the positive self relating to the positive world, which is its own projection, or we could say the positive self is the positive universe's back projection or retrojection, whatever. I don't know quite what you call it, but it's the same thing either way. We've got to be willing to make that leap from that situation to the situation where there is no positive self, there is no me, no localized, encapsulated me looking at things, which are the things I relate to, the things that make up the universe. Oh, there's a thing, yeah, I know that thing. There's another thing, yeah, there goes another. Isn't that good? Good old things. The world is full of things. And I know all about them. I can see all around them. I know everything that they are, really, because this is the realm of the known. So I've got to be willing to give up that and stop being a positive self in a positive world, a thing in a world that's made up of more things. So I'm like the subject thing, and all those are the objects thing. So I just keep this subject-object duality going the whole time into this situation, which corresponds to Kierkegaard's dizziness of freedom, because there's so much freedom there. It does make us dizzy, not in a literal sense necessarily, but that's kind of a word for it that we could use. Well, that Kierkegaard used, or maybe he didn't use that word because he wasn't writing in English, but some similar word. Whereas the important thing to understand is that when I am looking out of the world as this defined concrete identity, and I'm perceiving a defined concrete world, there is no freedom in that, and there can't be any freedom in that. Obviously, there's no freedom in it, because anything that is defined, there is no freedom in it, because to define means it's like this, and it's not like anything else at all. So there's no freedom for the thing to be in any other way. It just is what you say it is, what we say it is. It is what it is. And it isn't really what it is. We can only say it is what it is because we're adhering like limpets to the logical continuum of thought. Then we have this existence where things are just what they are, what they're said to be. So basically what I'm getting at is we really don't want to do this mental somersault or backflip, because the whole point of our existence is to reaffirm the identity that is based on us having no freedom, or there being no freedom in the world, no freedom for things to be every other way there could possibly be at the same time, because reality itself is infinitely generous. It doesn't just say, well, here you are, I'm going to give you this. It gives you the whole lot all in one go. It doesn't parcel out things. Whereas the thinking mind is a parceler. It's a miserly old parceler. And if you fill in loads of forms and, do all the right things, it'll hand you over this miserly little portion of reality. It'll say, this is you. This is the world. This is how things are. But it isn't at all, because there are no portions of reality. You can't divide it up. You can't portion it out. It's either everything, the whole lot, or nothing. Okay, thanks for watching.